The supreme, profound, and sublime Dharma is difficult to meet even in a billion eons, but now I have been fortunate enough to have seen it, heard it, received it, and kept it. I vow to attain the true meaning of the Tathagata. In order to liberate all sentient beings, let's generate the supreme bodhicitta. Today, let's continue with the class of transforming suffering and happiness into enlightenment. Last class, we didn't talk too much about the actual text, but we did talk about one of the most important instructions, pith instructions, in fact, about this. And that is, whenever we're harmed by sentient beings or anything else, if we make a habit out of perceiving only the suffering, then when even the smallest problem comes up, it will cause enormous anguish in our mind. What's the reason behind this? Because let it be happiness or suffering, if we habituate ourselves or familiar ourselves with this kind of mentality, then it will grow ever stronger. Whatever we feed into, it will get stronger. This is the pattern. I think the wording's really short. It's just a few lines of words. Really, really short. It's great wind outside, right? This year, that is 2020, I think at the beginning of this year, everyone was so hopeful, and because the number 2020 rhymes with the Chinese that is love you, and everyone was so excited about it and very hopeful, but it turned out to be a year that's very hard to fall in love with, because of the abnormal weather as well as the pandemic. Anyhow, over here it talks about if we habituate ourselves with the kind of mind that we enforce the idea of suffering. I'm so annoyed, I'm so angry, I'm so upset. If you habituate yourself with such kind of a mentality, then whatever little external condition that contributes to such thing would cause enormous suffering, enormous pain. And the reason is, whatever you habituate yourself with, it will grow ever stronger. For example, if you practice on familiarize yourself with a sacred outlook, and everything's pure, everything's the manifestation of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, all the sentient beings are just like my parents, then whatever sentient beings you see, whomsoever they are, whatever actions they uptake, you will be willing to accept it. You won't be upset about whatever they did. In such a way, just like Mepam Rinpoche said, even the enemies will eventually turn to become your friends. There is such a possibility. Similarly, if we have the right view, if we uphold the right view often, such as if you sow good seed, it will turn out to be good fruition, and bad seed with bad fruition. And if you familiarize yourself with the right view that everything is the blessing that comes from the Guru, then whatever suffering that you may be going through is not going to harm you at all. And this is just a natural pattern. Therefore, within such a short text, I think you should understand this is the secret of the mind, the secret of the mentality. Because mind has a secret, and if we can discover the secret, then whatever suffering happens in your life or pain happens in your life, it won't be traumatic to you, and whatever happiness you may have will be, however, everlasting. Even within really painful and excruciating environment, you can still find your happiness. So we should try to familiarize our mind with the right habit. Unlike some people that we see in our lives, they don't smile at all. Just maybe like Langri Tamba, maybe they are the relatives of Langri Tamba, and maybe they carry the genes of Langri Tamba. Because Langri Tamba, he only smiled once in his lifetime, in his whole life, when he saw a small mouse was trying to steal a turquoise gem from his mandala. The rest of the time, he never smiled. So some people are just like him. They're really long-faced all the time, and they're so upset all the time and never smile, whatever happens to them. So maybe it's Langri Tamba's children, but he doesn't have children, so maybe from his relatives' lineage. Well, does it have something to do with practice? I'm not so sure. Because there are people, whatever they encounter, they're still very positive and really happy. And that's just the two types of people we encounter in our lives. The one is that you cannot tell them anything, because they will get really tensed up and really upset. And then there are people who are completely fine, and even if they are not particularly good practitioners, but they have a good heart and big mind. They have their big-heartedness. They're big heart and very positive and not upset very often. So we should really analyze our own mentality and think about what kind of influence that we could bring to the others. Because sometimes we don't really understand ourselves, isn't it? We could look at ourselves in the mirror. We could look at our body from the mirror, use the reflections. Just like some sutras would say, like a beauty looking into the reflection of the mirror. Of course, the handsome guys could also look into the mirror and see the reflections and to understand oneself. However, without the mirror of teachings, the Dharma teachings, it would be very difficult for you to discover your shortcomings. Therefore, we should practice the Lojang teachings and try to see the shortcomings that we may have. And in order to call ourselves practitioners, it is to see the suffering of all sentient beings, to also see the shortcomings of ourselves, and to see what our mind is at the moment. Is our mind at the rather normal or the right, having the right mentality, or are we already developing the abnormal or the disorders in terms of our mentality or our psyche? So it is important to analyze ourselves, to look at ourselves. In Tibet, we say this idiom that it's very easy to see a small tick on other people's face, but even if on your own face there's a huge yak sitting on it, you won't be able to see it yourself. And this is really a kind of wrong way of seeing, and it could be a psychological disorder as well. This is very clearly stated in Buddhism. Nowadays, the modern psychology also states in some similar conditions, such as yesterday we talked about OCD, we talked about persecutory delusion, and there's another disorder. It's called allodoxophobia, which means it's a person's very difficult to make any choices or decisions, and that's also a kind of mental disorder. In Tibet, we say that for people to make choice is actually quite joyous, but for the ones who can't is quite painful. There are people who get tormented nowadays over what to wear, and some of them can't even get a full night's sleep because they kept on thinking about what should I wear, green and white? No, white doesn't look good because my clothing has to be white, has to be black, and so on. So they kept on thinking in such a way, and they would even go to the extent to mix and match clothing virtually on computer and so on. Nowadays, people really have lots of clothing. They have hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of clothing, and because they have so many and they can't mix and match, and then they couldn't fall asleep. So that's just one of the examples. Similarly, their friends, the tea, the food, there's so many different choices that they faced, and then that could bring lots of anxiety for the ones with allodoxophobia. Nowadays, the psychologists analyze many different kinds of disorders, and this phobia and that phobia, many different sorts of phobias. People, however, do not identify themselves with different kinds of phobias because they don't really analyze themselves. Anyhow, whatever you habituate yourself with, whatever kind of habit you familiarize yourself with, will then eventually become the cause of happiness or suffering. Yesterday, I quoted from Mahaparinirvana Sutra, where it is stated that if you worry about suffering, then you will suffer even more. This is quite important to remember because if you constantly worry about suffering and pain and anguish and anxiety, then such kind of anxiety and suffering will follow you at all times. So that's just how you familiarize yourself in terms of the thoughts. For example, there are people who would think that it's so hot today, it's so annoying, I didn't eat enough, that's really upsetting. So if you keep thinking in such a way, then you will create more suffering for yourselves. And psychologists would use different ways, different methods, such as tests and quiz and research and so on. They will come up with different kind of conclusions. Actually, just a partial conclusions. However, the previous masters, because they already understood the secret of the mind, let it be ultimate or relative. If the sentient beings continuously to familiarize themselves with such kind of thinking, the suffering will continuously to grow. That's something you probably already felt. And precisely that's the reason why Buddhism has profound pith instructions, and it is quite incredible and inconceivable and very beneficial. So previously we've already talked about suffering and happiness, and it is really up to you to make the choice whether you want to be happy or not. You are the master of it. Of course, not 100%, but majority of it is up to you. I think many young people nowadays, if they could receive the Buddhism education at an early age, then they will be able to suffer less, and they will be able to have more smooth roads in their life. If they can understand that happiness and suffering is not really based on the external conditions, rather it is by themselves, in this way, whatever they encounter in their life, let it be good and smooth or treacherous and difficult, they will be able to face life with rather calm and peaceful mind. Because of previous karma, because of the vexation, the external allures of the external distractions and so on, as well as the superficial and diluted education that comes from the media, all of those contribute to the suffering of many sentient beings. And because people's dream cannot be fulfilled or their wish cannot be fulfilled, they could probably end up choose a rather very unwise way, unwise path. Also, I think it's quite necessary to share such pith instructions to the others, to people around you. Of course, first of all, you have to have genuine insights first. You have to understand it yourself. Because if you benefited from such teachings, then you can share it with others. Just like if you are a patient, after taking the medicine, then you are cured, and also you get more healthy, and then whomsoever you see around you, whomsoever are suffering from the same illness, you would recommend that kind of medicine to the others. That genuine feeling of wanting to share with them, genuine feeling of wanting everyone to be happy. Not only that you are probably willing to share with others, while you're sharing with the others, your own insights could also increase. I don't think I will teach too much in terms of the text again, because I haven't taught so much lately. Therefore, I have lots to talk about. Previously, in the text, it talks about happiness and suffering. Talk about how people would habituate oneself with the thoughts of, oh, poor me, oh, I'm so annoyed, and so on. And if you habituate yourself with such kinds of thoughts, then you will suffer even more. If you familiarize yourself in such a way, eventually your emotions, your emotions and different kinds of sufferings will become even more painful. Whatever things you can get, even if they are happiness, if they are wealth, if they are success, whatever they are, can also become the cause of suffering, of unhappiness as well. Just like nowadays, there are people who are really unhappy. If you give him some candy, he would think it's not good for health. If you give him some teaching, he would think that you're using this to hurt me. You probably have a hidden agenda. If you introduce to him some of your good friends, he would think that all those people are bad people. They are trying to cheat him. And if you want to benefit him with all different kinds of things with good intention, he would think of all of those things as a cause of unhappiness. So for such kind of person, there's really no chance to gain any happiness. His whole life won't be happy at all because he practices on achieving suffering. Because mind has such kind of function. If you keep thinking that I'm not happy, you won't be happy. If you keep thinking that, oh, it's good, I'm happy, then you will be happy. The modern psychologists also agree with this teaching as well. Just as the other day I talked about reverse thinking versus traditional thinking. In fact, familiarizing yourself with the different ways of thinking is quite important. And it's very closely related. The great masters in the past from Tibet, where the technology is rather not so developed in the rural area, they've already discovered the secret of the mind. That is why people are so interested in the teaching of practice, especially Westerners. This teaching, in fact, was translated into many different languages, and that is one of the reasons. The Westerner, in the West, everything's so developed. They should be very happy, but that's not really true. Their pressure, their stress, and many kinds of mental suffering is cruciated. However, in Tibetan Buddhism, there are so many different methods. You can meditate, you can practice Tonglen, or you can practice great compassion, bodhicitta, meditation, and all of those kinds of methods would be very helpful to them. And therefore, the Westerners really enjoy all these kinds of teachings and methods. Yes, in Tibet, maybe we don't have developed economy or technology. However, from the historical point of view, there were many great masters who attained great achievement in terms of the science of mind, or in terms of the understanding of mind. I'm not boasting about it. I'm not praising because of some untruthful things that I made up. But we can see it through texts like this. This is the fact, because if in rural areas in Tibet that is really underdeveloped, people like the people such as the great masters like this, they have such understanding of the mind in such depth, including many of the Tantra teachings that we've learned recently. After we studied those Tantric teachings, we really felt that, oh, indeed, my life had changed drastically because I understood what the truth is. And now I can truly feel the wisdom within those teachings. Therefore, people nowadays, you should try to develop genuine insights about the inner experience as well as the wisdom. If you can feel it, if you can practice and have genuine insights, then you can also give the teaching to many more people and alleviate the suffering from them as well. In fact, wisdom transcends ethnics, regions, as well as countries. The great masters, all the way from Shakyamuni Buddha to the six ornaments and to supreme ones, they've truly discovered the core, the very essence of wisdom, and passed on that wisdom generations to generations until today. So we should practice in such a way, we should learn in such a way, especially now we've already attained this wonderful medicine that is meaningful to this life and many lifetimes to come. We should first obtain it ourselves, and then share it to the sentient beings. Just like medicine, let it be Tibetan medicine, Chinese traditional medicine, Western medicine, or medicines from India, Africa, as long as it provides a cure, then it is necessary. Same as vexation, same as affliction. If sentient beings are already poisoned by the afflictions of desire, ignorance, and anger or aggression, in that way they really need such kind of medicine so that they can be happy. If you, over here he talks about, if you familiarize yourself with that, I'm not happy, I'm suffering a lot, let you be with wealth or not, everything in the manifestation in front of you would become the cause of suffering. Many people would think that poor people are not happy because they don't have money. If they have money, then they will be happy. However, I've met many people who are really rich. They're probably one of the most rich ones in a city, in a region, or in a large area or so, but their mind is not happy. And some people would search or pursue social status. Once you have social status of a supervisor, you want to become a bigger. You want to obtain bigger power. You want to become a mayor. You want to become the premier or so. So by actually getting in touch with all this group of people, you will notice that in fact status doesn't really bring them happiness either. Similarly, relationship and so on, all of those things doesn't really bring you genuine happiness. So if you do not learn how to manage or how to tame your own mind, you won't be genuinely happy at all. And if you familiarize yourself with suffering, then suffering could get stronger. So that is not to say that the external phenomena doesn't bring any happiness at all, but it's very minimal. It is a very small factor because, for example, if you like hot pot, and you probably have hot pot right now, and it's really lovely, it's wonderful, it feels so pleasant, but is this pleasure going to be everlasting? No, that can't be, because if you eat hot pot every single day for 3 meals a day, you probably don't want it at all ever again. So the external phenomena, the happiness comes from external phenomena, is very limited. But if you can be happy from your inner mind and heart, then it surpasses all the external happiness. In fact, all of these teachings are quite precious, but if you don't practice or don't really have genuine insights of it, then simply reading this text or book is not really meaningful at all. For example, lots of great books such as Treasury of Dharmadhatu and Flights of the Garuda, as well as this textbook, if nobody give you the teaching, you won't be able to understand its genuine meanings. So you really, really have to listen to the teaching. The book itself, the content itself, do have some transmission, but you really need people who truly understand its meanings and have such insights to give you this teaching. That is really important. Some people would like to read the tantric teachings that's kept in secrets, but even if you read that, even if you read the most pithy instruction, you probably won't understand. But once you study it, listen to the teaching, listen to the pithy instruction, then you'll be able to understand that, wow, the book is quite amazing. So for all of the practitioners sitting here, please do not let your mind wander right now while you're wearing a mask and sitting there without truly emerge with its meaning. You will only receive oral transmission. There's no true function that it will bring to you. It doesn't really bring you the actual benefit in such a way. Next one, it talks about if we do not realize that it depends on the way in which mind develops its habit, and instead we put blame on external objects and situations alone. So some people don't understand that part, that it actually is the mind that brings happiness or suffering. So the flames of suffering, negative karma, aggression, and so on will spread like wildfire without end. This is called all appearances are arising as enemies. The majority of people in this world, they don't really understand that happiness or suffering completely relies on your own mind. They keep on thinking that everything is related to the external conditions. Sometimes we read the news and we can see that there are quarrels between states and many different unnecessary things. We can see through this kind of quarrels and conflicts that most people feel that they are not happy because of certain external conditions or phenomena. Some people would think that they're not happy because they don't have a good relationship, because they feel that there are enemies, they have some foes creating obstacles, because they don't have money, they don't have house, because the society is unfair, because there's not enough opportunities for them. But they don't really understand that, in fact, the unhappiness is brought by themselves, by their own mind. That is the sole reason. If you only blame on the external things, such as so and so is not nice to me, I don't have enough merit, I don't have enough opportunities, why is it that other people could earn lots of money but I can't? There are so many people nowadays, they have so much unsatisfying they have so many unsatisfying blames towards everything else, to the society, to their supervisor, to their teachers and doctors. But nowadays, in fact, at the end, in fact, the fire of the wildfire of negative karma would burn themselves first. This teaching is so very precious. I think each word should worth $10,000 US. What does it mean that all the appearances arising as enemies? Because people would complain about everything that happens outside is something that's external. However, they don't know that everything is the suffering is caused by their own mind, by blaming and so on. The wildfire of suffering will consume them first.
不管是他们就是这个表面上呢，就是讲的如何的漂亮，但是实际上的话呢
People with money or wealth, if you look at people from across the globe, however nicely they can talk, however nicely they can cover up their unhappiness. In fact, because of the unhappiness within, his language or action is always in conflict, and that is the reflection of their own mind. And because of that, the wildfire of suffering and negative karma is currently burning the whole world. Including why are people not happy in families? Why are people complaining about others? It is really because people had already turned all appearances arising as enemies, or perceive them as all enemies. This is quite famous in Tibetan, this sentence particular, because it explains that if your mind is not well, then whomsoever you see, you get in contact with, hear, and even if they're your family and friends, you would feel that those people are going to harm you. So people with a mind like such would feel that everyone's the enemy. Everyone is trying to hurt you, even if they are your closest friend. They must have agendas, you might think. Other than human beings, it could be yaks, goats, dogs. All of those animals could become enemies as well. And in terms of sound, the teachings from others, the sound of sparrow, sounds of cuckoo birds, the sound of a bird from Tibet. How does my imitation sound? Is it good? I used to be very good at imitating that bird. Anyhow, that particular bird sounded really nice. But without good practice, if you can't tame your mind, you would probably hate that bird and feel that that noise or that sound is really annoying. Whatever sound we hear, it could be sutras chanted by great masters. If you don't have a tamed mind, you would think such kind of chanting is very annoying. Similarly, the same principle applies to your nose, your body, your consciousness. Whatever smell, whatever fragrance could bring you unhappiness. Whatever things you touch could bring you unhappiness. If you're not in a good mood, you would think that everything outside is being annoying. And that is all appearances arising as enemies. In Lankavatara Sutra, it says that there are so many different things could manifest from your own mind, but our mind would differentiate everything. And then it says that without understanding it, everything is really the manifestation of mind. People tend to search outside of their mind. In fact, everything external are only delusions from your own mind. The mundane beings really don't understand that, and because they don't understand, it is quite a pity that they don't understand. People from the world do not understand that happiness and suffering comes from themselves, and they only complain and whining about others. They think that the external phenomena brings them suffering. So we now should understand, in fact, there are conditions that's brought about from the external phenomena, but the majority of the cause for your happiness or unhappiness really comes from your own mind. If you have an open heart, if you have a big heart, even the vicious enemies of yours cannot harm you. But if you cannot do that, the main reason is that because your wisdom is not matured yet, because you grasp too much onto the external phenomena, because those are delusions. Do you understand? Delusions and graspings, just like how an old monk that I know would say in such a way. So, delusions and graspings. What does that mean? It means that initially it doesn't have anything, but you are grasping onto it to be in such a way, therefore it appears in such a way, or you can grasp in such a kind of delusion. In the Tang Dynasty, there's a kingdom called Silla Kingdom that is on the Korea Peninsula. At the time, North and South Korea were still together. A famous Zen master named Master Wenhyo, he heard that Master Xuanzang has great lineage of Chittamatra, the mind-only school. Therefore, he wanted to go to China and study from Master Xuanzang. So on the way to China, there was one day that it got really dark outside, and he was alone on the way, and he was thirsty, and he was hungry, and he couldn't walk anymore at a cave, at the door of a cave, or at the opening of the cave. So under the moonlight, he saw this really clear pond. And then right away, he went into that pond and started drinking the water. And he felt that he never had such delicious, sweet water ever. And then he slept somewhere nearby. Second morning, when he woke up, he saw that he is sleeping on top of a tomb, and then the water he drank was the water that oozed out from the corpse. At the moment, he felt really disgusted, and he was throwing up, and it was quite disgusting to him, and he felt discomfort in his stomach and so on. After a while, he started to think, why is it that for the same kind of situation, it could be so beautiful last night but so disgusting in the morning? He then discovered that because the mind Because if the mind arises, then many manifestations would arise, and if the mind ceases or thought ceases, then the many different kinds of manifestations would also cease. He realized that teaching. He realized that everything is mind. It, in fact, is not brought forth by the external phenomena. Maybe now we're not really at such kind of a level of insight yet. But we should understand that, yes, there are happiness or causes of happiness and unhappiness from external phenomena, from the external world. However, the majority of the reasons and the causes for happiness and unhappiness is really from within. And for this, many of the young people don't understand. Maybe because I met lots of people. I've met many different kinds of people. Also, I'm not afraid of getting in touch with different people. Of course, Of course, other than lunatics, I really enjoy getting to know others, people from different walks of life. In fact, I enjoy getting to know all of them. And after getting to know lots of people, I think about that many times, that if these people have some inner realization, it would be very beneficial for them, because they're suffering so much. If he could have encountered Dharma earlier, if he could have some realization of the Dharma, wouldn't that be so wonderful? He would be alleviated. Especially when I see people who fight over wealth, fight over different things, and then I would have such kind of thinking. So I really hope many of you here do not turn your manifestations, do not turn your appearances into enemies. Everything appears, everything manifests should appear as your relatives and friends. Whatever appearances they are, they can become the helpers of your practice. They can become the contributing favorable conditions to your practice. I often talk about do not complain about others. Otherwise, your appearances would arise as enemies. If that happens, it's in fact a very horrifying situation. There are people who claim themselves to be Buddhists. They've studied, they've also get ordained for 10 or 20 years, but all they can talk about is other people's shortcomings. There are some teachers and some leaders or supervisors. If they like to talk about shortcomings of others, and then their followers, their fans, so to speak, would also love to talk about the shortcomings, or contributing in such a way, making such kind of Dharma offerings of shortcomings to the others, especially if the supervisor is in such a way, doesn't really like anything, likes to slander others or use coarse language and so on, then all the followers of that person would do so as well. All you could see, if that's how your mind works, would be an ugly world that is full of corruption and full of injustice and so on. And then, similarly, all of your relatives or all of your followers would provide you with the information of such kind of a negative with negative connotation. We can see a person's mind. A person's language could reflect his or her mind. So you can definitely tell if a person is peaceful or not, if the person's happy or not through his or her language. Therefore, I encourage those of you who serve your teacher, serve your guru, you should try to provide positive Dharma offerings and talk about practice and listening, to talk about the merits and to talk about beneficial things about the social that contribute to society as well as sentient beings. This is quite important. In fact, this is quite important because if you do not look inwardly, then everything else could become your enemies. For good practitioners, he or she could see everything as Pure Land and Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Even if the two kinds of people live in the same world, the ones with a good practice, with a good realization, then living in 3-star hotel, 5-star hotel would all be fine. I just remember that at the beginning of, in the very early days of Larungar, all the houses were built by reeds and mud. And from time to time, during meal times even, the mud clumps would fall down from the roof. And even living in such kind of situation, it was a happy time. Also, I remember another thing when Ponsuk Rinpoche came back from Burkham. I think at the time we stayed in a small hotel that cost only 3 yuan or 5 yuan a night. Maybe because I was really young, I felt very happy at that time, though the blanket was extremely dirty and it was really cold. So I only used that blanket to cover a part of my legs and knees. But my mind was very happy. If your mind is not clear, is not clean, is not happy, then it will be very difficult for the external phenomena to bring you genuine happiness. People would think that I can buy a car without any problem. At first, he would think that, well, I can buy a car that was 50,000. But after having 50,000 car, you probably want a 100,000 car. And the mind would continuously to long for more, and more and more. And in such a way, you would have to suffer from working more, because you're working more and you're suffering because you have no ability of controlling your mind. With the growth of with the changes, with the growth of desire of your mind, then you would try to manipulate the external phenomena, or you would try to manipulate the external conditions. Similarly, it applies to our negative emotions. If we do not try to tame it at first, then it will continuously to grow and bring about everything appear as our enemies. In such a way, the practitioner is rather very unsuccessful. So we should arrive at very precise understanding that the whole reason why sentient beings in this degenerate age are plagued by so much suffering is because they have such feeble powers of discernment. We have to deepen our understanding that nowadays the beings in the degenerated age are suffering, and the root of such suffering comes from deluded thoughts. At least 90% of their suffering comes from this deluded thoughts. And this kind of negative results are not seen by others. In fact, only very rare and very small number of people can genuinely see the true cause of it. Not only the mundane beings, even practitioners who've practiced for years and years, they probably don't really understand the genuine meaning, and that is very sad and very pitiful, because many people probably already got or took refuge about 20 years ago, and whenever they get in touch with other people, whenever they have interpersonal conversations, they still feel lots of jealousy and arrogance, as well as afflictions, sometimes even worse than the vengeful spirits of Wutang, the Wutang area. So practitioners should try their best to tame their mind stream.
为此呢，就是不被
Let you be Westerners or Easterners, lay practitioner or ordained practitioners, old or young.
那
It's really important to recognize that the reason of our suffering is because we have negative and deluded thoughts.
不是这个意思啊，就不
So
要被
over
动的
here
受
it
害
says
影响
that,
不是说
so do not be hurt by the obstacles created by enemies, illusions, or harmful influences. Over here it doesn't mean that
要让他们呢就是无法
do
承受
not
这种威严
get rid of the illness or sickness that you already have and let it never ever happen again. But
永远也不会什么出现就是烦恼，就是你要
it is to transform it onto the path of practice
你要是在遇见
and
当
do
中
not let any of the sickness and afflictions become an obstacle on your path, because we cannot avoid sickness. We cannot avoid birth, old age, sickness, and death.
修行的这种外缘啊，就是修行
It is inevitable in the realm of desire, but we can then transform it instead of get rid of it, because we cannot get rid of it. So it's really important to recognize afflictions, to work with afflictions, and to recognize our own mind. We're not trying to tame the external appearance. We're not trying to tame all of our enemies outside. It doesn't mean that at all. In fact, to eradicate all the sickness is impossible. Even the medicine Buddha cannot do that. Just like
就是度无边无际的。
in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, where it says that the stubborn ones are as many as the space. How can you?
所有的这些
The stubborn enemy or stubborn ones are as many as the space. Who can actually tame all of
我
them?
们就是
We cannot tame all of the external beings. However,
可以
we can tame our
跳过。如果这个
mind with
烦恼
aggression,
不让
and in
跳过
such a way it is just like we've already tamed all of our, we've already
它呢就
eliminated all of our
不会
enemies.
有这个修行的障碍。所以这一点，我们
If we
这个
can
有些人可能
tame
啊
our
修行法呢
afflictions,
就是是不是从来不
maybe some of
从来不会
the
这个痛苦
obstacles could happen. However, any obstacles cannot become the
这个烦恼会会产生
obstacles of
但是这种
practice.
产生的话
And
就是应该是有一种方法就像《造宝藏经》当中也讲，愚昧原则。
people used to ask me, I remember people used to ask me that if I practiced Buddhism, am I never going to have afflictions anymore? Am I never going to have suffering and anger anymore? It's not like that. There will be afflictions, there will be anger and suffering. However, just as it is stated in the Sutra of Miscellaneous Treasures, where it says that in order to tame all the enemies, you should then tame your afflictions.
自己痛苦的心态。还有呢，
So
就是对于造
so the best way of taming your affliction is to tame your mind, to transform happiness and suffering into enlightenment. That is really the best.
顺缘。那么这个是需要什么呢？
Over here it says that rather it is simple. It is in order for this to happen, we need first to get rid of the attitude of being entirely unwilling to face any suffering ourselves. Second, to cultivate the attitude of actually being joyful when suffering arises.
可以产生的就是这是第一个方面。下面会讲这个，但是我今天这个呢，就是稍微发挥给大家也要讲一下。
I think today we're going to talk about the first one. And over here it says that suffering will happen.
烦恼不要这样的，痛苦产生的时候你就乐意接受。然而
And
这是
instead of trying to push the suffering away or get rid of that,
产生没事，就让它产生。那产生的话，
you
怎么会
should develop the attitude of willingly to accept
我
suffering.
要通过修行的方法呢，就是让这些痛苦呢，就是对我
For a practitioner,
就是最后的话，
you can think that I am going to transform this suffering into the path of practice. I'm going to transform it into
真的
a favorable condition.
经常观修的人的话，刚开始是
For practitioners,
有点害怕，有点害怕。
especially the beginners, I think it will be very difficult at the beginning. But if you familiarize yourself, if you practice it, it's going to be very beneficial. I think at the beginning, it could be a little bit scary to think about having suffering arising in your life, but eventually it will be helpful. For example, our traditional way of thinking is that to pray for health, happiness, safety, that's a very mundane way, very normal way that happens in the life. You have a certain expectation, a certain wish, just as how mundane beings would get married, would have children, and then work. So that's one way of thinking. That's a traditional way of thinking. And there's another way of thinking that is how we can face life, and especially face the randomness that happens, or random things that happens in your life. It is not necessarily that things would happen in the order that we would expect it. Many changes could happen, many impermanence. Whenever that kind of changes happen, how would you face it? When there's no change, you're happy, but when there is a change, you would feel upset, isn't it? However, during practice, you should be able to transform such kind of feeling. An author, his name's Nassim Taleb, wrote a book called Anti-Fragile. In fact, the opposite of fragility is non-fragility or bravery. So what is bravery? Bravery is whenever you encounter any obstacles, you would be rather quite calm and peaceful without being beaten down. That's how we would say that this person is very brave. Just as if you get sick, you are behaving in a way that just as you never got sick. So you're kind of maintaining that sense of normal emotions when you're dealing with sickness. However, over here in his book, what he meant by anti-fragile is more than bravery, because not only you deal with whatever obstacles that arise in your life, you in fact could gain benefit from it. For example, when you are sick, when you're not sick, you're happy, but when you get sick, not only you're happy, you could get even healthier or even get more other benefit in such a kind of a happy state of mind. And this kind of mentality is considered as anti-fragile and is considered as a sign of resilience, and it is very beneficial to your life. In his book, he said that people should be more like cats or squirrels, where they can fall from a very high spot, but because of their flexibility and resilience, they're not going to get hurt. And by practicing so, they can probably get even better from jumping down from higher spots. But the people who are really fragile, they're like washing machines. If one part is broken, then you're completely broken down and fixable. So this is a sign of fragility. That's how he thought. How he explained his theory. However, in Mahayana Buddhism, not only we're not fragile, we can learn a lot from different obstacles. For example, during this pandemic, I think lots of Buddhists truly realize that if there is no suffering, there is no renunciation. I think this could be very beneficial. And from this pandemic, we can actually consider and contemplate about the meaning of life, the nature of samsara, and the truth of impermanence, then you can truly gain some genuine insights within yourself. Lu Xun, who is a Chinese author, he talked about spiritual victory in his writing, but this is really not teaching you how to have this spiritual victory. Because spiritual victory talks about this numb sense of or this sense of training yourself to feel good about yourself, but that's not how it is in Buddhism. Rather, Buddhism talks about to realize the true nature of samsara. Whenever we perceive some changes happening in our life, we should see through it and see the nature of samsara and get closer to the nature of everything, of all phenomena, and then we will be able to transform all the suffering. The successful people nowadays, not only they have to have high EQ, high IQ, also they have to have high AQ, that is the adversity quotient. Whenever you can have all three kinds of the Qs, you'll be able to transcend the obstacles. And in Buddhism, in this teaching, it talks about not only to transcend it or surpass it, it is to transform it into a way that would be more beneficial to your own practice as well as to your life. I think you probably never heard of such kind of teachings. Maybe before this teaching, you would consider that as long as I'm not suffering, then that's good enough. But you never would have known that suffering, this kind of suffering, could be very beneficial and meaningful to your own practice and life. This kind of teaching is rather very difficult to be discovered by the mundane people. So this is really important. It is kind of similar to misfortune is a blessing in disguise. However, mundane people or non-practitioners would think that it's only happened by chance. However, if we could really recognize it, it could be very meaningful. I think because of due to the lack of time, I think we will talk about the rest of the teaching in some part of the teaching next class, where it talks about the second part. So over here it talks about you should be willingly accept the happiness. Whenever suffering comes, you should be, I'm so happy, I'm really glad that suffering is coming. In such a way, I can practice and transform suffering onto the path and into enlightenment. We'll continue that next class.
Kirgana jiranong chupa ye chubam zolen jova